So Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has this massive vision for the future of AI. And when I say massive, I mean it touches everything, from global energy to regulation to how we fundamentally live our lives. To really get our heads around it, we've kind of broken down his key ideas into a clear story so we can all see where this incredible technology is headed.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We've organized his thinking into 5 big themes. First up, the sheer, raw energy and scale of AI adoption that's happening all over the globe. Then, we'll dive into the huge dilemma of how to regulate it. After that, the almost unbelievable amount of money being bet on this future. Fourth, we'll look at what the tech itself is going to look like next, and we'll wrap up with what's maybe the most important part of all, the human equation.
To get a real feel for the scale we're talking about, let's just start with one number, 100 million. That's the number of weekly active users ChatGPT has. That one figure really anchors this entire conversation and sets the stage perfectly for our first topic, AI's global footprint.
And look, this insane growth, it's not just happening in Silicon Valley, right? It's a worldwide thing. But to really show what this explosive adoption looks like, Altman points to one country in particular that he says has this really unique kind of energy.
Yeah, he points to India as this perfect case study for AI's global potential. And it's not just that it's already OpenAI's second biggest market or the fastest growing one for their coding tool, Codex. The real key here is the incredible focus on building the entire AI stack. We're talking everything from data centers all the way to brand new apps. Altman even says that no other country quite matches its total AI energy.
Okay, but with this kind of massive global scale, you've got an equally massive challenge, right? How on earth do you regulate a technology that's moving at lightning speed and just completely ignores borders? It's a question that, leaders everywhere are trying to figure out.
And Altman's the first one to say, hey, there are no easy answers here. He really stresses that looking to the past for some perfect blueprint is just not going to work because AI is, well, it's just brand new. But even with that big disclaimer, he does offer a pretty surprising historical example for how we might start to think about it.
So what's his big example? The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, hold on. He's super clear this is not a perfect analogy for AI. But what he thinks is so fascinating is that it was a moment where the world, including bitter rivals, actually managed to come together to deal with the huge risks of a powerful new technology, while also figuring out how to share its benefits.
So this leads to this really interesting idea he has for the future, this kind of two-sided coin. He's convinced that countries will and probably should fiercely compete on the economic side of things, building their own models, their own companies. But, and this is the big but, at the exact same time, they absolutely must work together on safety to prevent the worst outcomes. All right, so setting aside the whole regulation puzzle for a second, there's another giant hurdle, the money. I mean, the staggering cost of all this. We are literally talking about $1 trillion bet on building this future with just immense investments in infrastructure.
And this kind of spending, it brings up a question that, guys like Altman get all the time. Is any of this even sustainable? Are these companies just letting mountains of cash on fire with no real plan to ever make it back?
And Altman's answer is, well, it's the exact opposite of what you'd expect. He doesn't think we're spending too much. He actually thinks we're going to look back and wish we had spent way more, way sooner. His bet is that if you can make intelligence incredibly cheap and abundant, the demand for it is going to be basically infinite.
And that's where his 2-part plan to pay for all this comes in. On one side, you have an ad-supported model. This could give access to everyone, even people who can't pay for a subscription. And on the other side, he sees this massive market for businesses who will pay top dollar for powerful AI agents that can automate really complex work for them.
Okay, so if that's the business model, what's the actual tech that's going to make it all happen? Because it's not just about, slightly smarter chatbots. Altman is pointing to a really fundamental shift in how we're all going to use computers.
He talks a lot about something called agentic AI, and he uses projects like OpenClaw as an example. Think of it like this. AI stops being a passive tool you ask questions to and starts being an active agent that goes and does things for you. It understands your goals and can actually take multiple steps to get things done.
And you can just tell how excited Altman is about this. He calls it one of those rare moments where we can unequivocally get to see the future of computing. This is the big leap, right? From just processing information to actually accomplishing things in the real world.
So, of course, you hear all this stuff about the future, and it leads to the one question everyone really wants to know.
So when are we getting the next big thing? What about GPT-5 or even GPT-6?
And look, here's the deal. He won't give you a date or a name. But what he will say is that the underlying progress, that model improvement trajectory, is still extremely steep. The big message here is don't get hung up on the names and the numbers. The relentless pace of improvement is what matters, and that is not slowing down.
So, let's get to the final piece of the puzzle. And honestly, it's probably the most important one. What does all this insane technological leap actually mean for us? For our jobs, for society, and yeah, for our kids?
On the jobs question, Altman draws a really important line in the sand. He sees what he calls AI washing. You know, companies basically using AI as an excuse for layoffs they wanted to do anyway. But he is also very clear that the real, actual job displacement from AI is going to become a much, much bigger deal in the years to come. And this all touches on something really profound, a huge generational shift. As a dad, he talks about this wild idea. For his kids, a world where the technology they use is just smarter than them. That won't be weird or sci-fi, it'll just be normal. They'll never know a time before AI. And that changes, well, everything. And that just leaves us with this final, kind of mind-bending thought. If this whole transition feels so huge and strange to us, but it's completely normal to the next generation, what does that change? What happens when an entire generation grows up just assuming that the tools they use are fundamentally smarter than the people who made them? What does that change about us?